If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. In today's video, I want to talk about Nikola Tesla and his amazing connection with the law of attraction and with Vedic science. My first encounter with Nikola Tesla was actually through the movie The Prestige. It's a story about two rival magicians who basically, in their amazing attempt to one-up each other, one of them ends up in Colorado and into the laboratory of Nikola Tesla. He understands that Tesla is just a man who is a wizard with electricity. And when he approaches the factory, that laboratory, to meet Tesla for the first time, Tesla emerges from like this field of electricity. He gives Angiers like a light bulb to hold, and he shakes his hand. And when Tesla touches that man's hand, it lights up. The light bulb lights up. And Angiers is completely in shock, and he says, how could this be? And Tesla says that, the human body is perfectly capable of conducting electricity. Now this is particularly notable because Tesla was profound in his ability to invent from his superconscious mind. The superconscious mind, or an etheric source where information can come in from outside of the individual. Tesla wrote an entire book called My Inventions, which not a lot of people have read. But in it he talks about how his mind was constantly just conceptualizing and forming ideas without him actually tinkering with anything hands-on. On the opposite of Tesla there was Thomas Edison, of course. Edison wasn't actually a very good inventor at all. He was just a brilliant businessman and a brilliant marketer. He bought most of his patents, he bought most of his inventions, and he basically stamped his own name on them. But Tesla, rather than using crank forces, which is just, being against a wall, trying to make something happen just by a trial and error, Tesla simply called on universal forces, one could say, and allowed ideas to emerge. Here are some amazing ideas that Tesla wrote in his book, My Inventions. Of course, the PDF will be linked below. He said, "I'm credited with being one of the hardest workers, and perhaps I am, if thought is the equivalent of labor, for I've devoted to it almost all of my waking hours. But if work is interpreted to a definite performance in a specified time according to a rigid rule, then I may be the worst of idlers. Every effort under compulsion demands a sacrifice of life energy. I never paid such a price. On the contrary, I thrived on my thoughts." Now this is particularly notable because Tesla is basically saying that his work never felt like work. He thrived on his thoughts, he thrived on his efforts, and he never worked out of compulsion. And so, in modern society, we all have various compulsions that we have to give our way to. We have to pay the bills, we have to earn some amount of money, and for most of us, or for many of us who don't entirely work for ourselves, this does involve working under compulsion to at least a degree. And this might be even heightened by the fact that some of us have various vices and addictions that we feel we can't escape the grasp of. And so this leads to its own level of compulsion that goes alongside it. But Tesla basically harnessed all his intellectual power, all his powers of thought, towards the pursuit of his inventions, and it was never work for him. He devoted almost all of his waking hours to it, which is why he was credited as a hard worker, perhaps. But he also had this etheric connection with his thoughts that allowed them to just flow freely, and there wasn't hard work behind it. It was more inspired work. Now I think this is a brilliant way to which the law of attraction can apply into our lives, and really I would argue that Tesla might have been one of the most profound users and advocates of the law of attraction, because he was actually just engaging in this amazing creative visualization to get the results he was wanting. He would just visualize harnessing energy, visualize bringing prosperity to society, and from that ether, because his intellectual powers were so incredibly strong, from that ether he found the results, and he found the inventions just flash into his insight, and allowed him to really produce these amazing, amazing technologies. He goes on to say, "Our first endeavors are purely instinctive, promptings of an imagination vivid and undisciplined. As we grow older, reason asserts itself, and we become more and more systematic and designing. But those early impulses, though not immediately productive, are of the greatest moment and may shape our very destinies. Indeed, I feel now that had I understood and cultivated instead of suppressing them, I would have added substantial value to bequest to the world. But not until had I attained manhood did I realize I was an inventor. What is Tesla saying here? Basically, one should always give their way to intuition. You should always honor your intuitions. Tesla had these amazing instinctive ideas, the promptings of a very vivid and undisciplined imagination when he was a kid, but he only learned the notion of harnessing that when he grew into adulthood. And so the lesson here is, what are your intuitions? Maybe you can journal about them, maybe you can write about them, but there are intuition based insights that are within you. I strongly believe that every man or woman has like a soul of personal expression, you know? Like Bruce Lee would say, I'm not trying to do kung fu, I'm just trying to find ways to express myself. Everyone has that seed of expression within themselves. And Tesla acknowledged in his book that he only began to find his source of power, his source of productivity, when he began to honor that. He began to honor what was within him. You know, he said, I would have added substantial value to bequest the world. But he didn't realize it, that he was supposed to be an inventor till he reached manhood. Now, it is important to note that Tesla was, I think, just born remarkable. He says this, my sight and hearing were always extraordinary. I could clearly discern objects in the distance when others saw no trace of them. Several times in my boyhood, I saved the houses of our neighbors from fire by hearing the faint crackling sounds which did not disturb their sleep and calling for help. You know, I think it's very hard for us to apply this principle, the principle of having amazing sight and hearing. I can say though, people who cultivate disciplines in their life, such as meditation, such as working to stay powerfully present, your hearing does improve from that, your sight does improve from that. I will say that in my 8 months, almost 9 months of working to maintain the powerful disciplines that I've learned about recently, I can say that my hearing and my sight, my senses in general, have become heightened from these disciplines, such as meditation, such as brahmacharya, such as cold showers. And so there is a degree of genius that gets invoked when one is just powerfully present and, you know, operates from heightened senses. For a while, I gave myself entirely to the intense enjoyment of picturing machines and devising new forms. It was a mental state of happiness about as complete as I have ever known. Now, what Tesla described here is really relevant, I would say, to the law of attraction, but I was even more shocked to find in my studies, in my research of Tesla, about his connection to Vedic science. Vedic science, or basically the science that comes out of Hindu spiritualism. In a letter dated to February 13th, 1896, an actress named Sarah Barnhart introduced Nikola Tesla to the great Indian sage Swami Vivekananda. This blew my mind. When I first learned that Tesla had an acquaintanceship with Swami Vivekananda, it was utterly shocking. And according to those notebooks, that text, Vivekananda and Tesla, they discussed a number of things, but primarily they focused on the notions of prana, akasha, and kalpas, or, you know, in Hindi, pran, which means your vital life force energy, akash, which means the ether, and kalpas. These are the three elementary concepts of the Vedantic doctrine. Respectively, they're understood as vital energy, the ether, and the idea of the aeon. So, in a posthumously published article called Man's Greatest Achievement, which was written in 1907, Tesla wrote about the use of akash and prana as such. He wrote, long ago, mankind recognized that all perceptible matter comes from a primary substance or tenuity beyond conception, filling all space. The akash, or luminiferous ether, which is acted upon by the life-giving prana, or creative force, calling into existence in never-ending cycles of all things and phenomena. The primary substance, thrown into infinitesimal whirls of prodigious velocity, becomes gross matter, the force subsiding the motion ceases and the matter disappears, reverting to the primary source. Okay, I know this sounds it's really hard to break down the genius of Tesla, but basically what I think he's saying here is that man long ago recognized that there is a primary substance that is beyond conception, known as, in the Vedantic terms, it's known as akash, the ether. But this is also very similar to what Brian Tracy and modern speakers would call the superconscious mind. That ether by which there is an infinite intelligence. That's what Napoleon Hill would have called it. In that ether of intelligence, Tesla found worlds of knowledge, and his job was to bring them into gross matter. So from that primary substance, Tesla sought to find out the gross matter conception of that. The fact that energy can be generated from the primordial ether is a fundamental tenet in the Vedas. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. I think in order for us to function closer to what Tesla had been tapped into for the majority of his life, we've basically got to focus on two things. Building up prana, which is building up life force energy. This happens by eating nutritious foods. It happens by the practice of brahmacharya, cultivating that life force energy within you. By the habit of staying really powerfully present through the practice of meditation, transmuting your vital energy. And also by visualizing, using the practice of creative visualization and the use of your intuition. Now these trifecta of forces brought in together, I feel can help us invent the results that we want in our own life. That's a crazy thing to say, but Tesla was a man with this otherworldly connection. And I think that's what this connection was. He had this pranic strength, this pranic vitality within him, and he was able to connect it to an ether force, which in the Vedantic terms is known as the akash, the ether. And so the best ideas that I could come up with for us to enact more pranic vitality and more of a connection to the superconscious mind is to honor our intuitions always, do meditation, transmute our vital energies, eat high vibration foods, and do creative visualization towards our results. That's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you very, very shortly. Cheers.